The room went quiet the moment my grandmother spoke. "Avery," Judith said calmly, "have you finally met the couple living in your lake house?" I felt my smile freeze. My fork hovered in midair. Across the table, my father's hand slipped, metal clinking sharply against porcelain. My mother straightened too fast. My sister Chloe stared down at her plate like it had suddenly offended her. This is an original story written by the author of the Revenge World channel, built from familiar social issues with the purpose of helping viewers reflect, heal, and draw meaningful lessons. The content is not intended to depict any real individual. "I think you've confused me with someone else," I said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "I don't own a house." Judith didn't blink. "The one near the lake, northern Michigan. I checked on it last week." My mother reached for her wine. "Mom, you've just gotten back. Travel does that to you." "I know what I signed," Judith replied. "And I know whose name was on it." My chest tightened. "I can barely keep a roof over my head," I said. "My lease ended. I'm staying on a friend's couch." Chloe shifted. "Avery, maybe this isn't the time." "When would be?" Judith asked, her voice still even. "After everyone finishes benefiting." My father cleared his throat. "We didn't want to overwhelm her. Avery struggles with pressure." That landed harder than the silence. I looked at him. "You watched me juggle jobs and told me to be independent." Judith folded her hands. "Then explain why strangers answered the door of her house." "No one did. If you're listening to this and something about that silence feels familiar, stay with me. What comes next isn't about a house. It's about how easily the people who claim to love you decide who you're allowed to be." I set my fork down. My hands were shaking now, and everyone could see it. "I don't know what you think I own," I said, meeting each of their eyes. "But someone has been living a life I never knew existed." No one spoke. The silence stretched long enough to feel intentional. My mother broke it first. "Judith, you've been traveling for months," Marilyn said gently. "Different time zones, different places. It's easy to mix things up." Judith turned her head slightly. "I didn't mix up the address." My father leaned back. "Mom, Avery has been under a lot of stress. We didn't think adding responsibility would help." I laughed, short and sharp. Responsibility for what Judith reached into her bag and pulled out a folded photograph. She didn't slam it down. She slid it across the table, slow enough for everyone to see it coming. Chloe's breath hitched. In the photo, she stood between her husband Ryan and his parents, Stephen and Patricia, all smiling in front of a pale blue house by the water. I recognized it instantly. Chloe had posted it online months ago, captioned with something about fresh air and new beginnings. "That's not my house," Chloe said too quickly. Judith kept her eyes on her. "Then why did the people living there tell me it belonged to you? I never said that." Chloe replied, her voice rising. "Ryan's parents needed somewhere quiet. The house was empty. It was empty because I didn't know it existed." I said. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "I was applying for apartments and getting rejected because my credit was destroyed." My father looked away. "We handled things the best way we could. For who I asked." Judith folded the photo in half. "When I knocked on that door, they welcomed me like family. They said they paid rent every month." Chloe stood up. "This is getting out of hand." Judith met her movement without standing. "No," she said. "This is finally in hand." The table felt smaller now. The lies had nowhere left to sit. My grandmother turned to my parents, her voice steady but sharpened. "You told me Avery wasn't capable of managing assets." "Say it again." Slowly. My father inhaled. "She gets overwhelmed," Frank said. "Pressure affects her judgment." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "You watched me work 3 jobs." I said. "You told me independence would build character." My mother nodded, almost relieved. "Exactly. We didn't want to burden you with something that big." Judith's eyes didn't leave her. Something big, like a home. It wasn't a home, Marilyn replied. It was a responsibility. I laughed, then stopped myself. I was sleeping on a couch. I said, "That wasn't a responsibility." Frank leaned forward. "We managed things until you were stable. Stable enough to pay my bills." I said, "Not stable enough to know what you took." Chloe crossed her arms. "You're twisting this." Judith lifted her hand, silencing her. "If Avery couldn't handle ownership," she said, "why was she allowed to carry debt, rejection, and shame?" No one answered. My chest tightened. "You let me think I was failing." I said, "You let me believe it." Marilyn's voice softened. "Hardship builds strength." Judith's gaze hardened. Hardship built secrecy in this house. She reached for her phone. "Ethan will join us." Frank stiffened. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," Judith said, "because for your own good is not a legal strategy." I realized then that this dinner was never meant to reassure me. It was meant to measure how far the truth would bend before it broke. The doorbell rang once. Clean. Precise. Judith stood before anyone else could react. When she returned, a man in a dark coat stepped in beside her. He carried a slim leather folder and the kind of calm that made people straighten in their chairs. "This is Ethan Miller," Judith said. "My attorney." Ethan nodded to the table. "I won't take much time." My father's jaw tightened. "This is unnecessary." Ethan met his eyes. "That depends on what you consider unnecessary." Judith gestured to an empty chair. Ethan didn't sit. He opened the folder instead. "Last week," he said, "Mrs. Collins asked me to verify a property she purchased 8 years ago in her granddaughter's name. A residence in a lake community in northern Michigan." Chloe's voice cut in. "That doesn't prove anything. It establishes standing." Ethan replied, "Nothing more. Yet." I felt my pulse in my ears. Ethan continued, "When Mrs. Collins visited the property, it was occupied by Stephen and Patricia Walker. They stated they believed the home belonged to their daughter-in-law." "That's a misunderstanding," my mother said quickly. Ethan didn't look at her. "They also stated they pay rent. Monthly." Judith's voice was quiet. "You told me Avery couldn't manage ownership." My father swallowed. "We were protecting her." Ethan closed the folder. "Protection does not include concealment. What we have so far raises civil concerns. Further conclusions will depend on records." He looked at me then. Not unkindly. "Ms. Collins, this conversation is no longer hypothetical." The weight of that settled into my chest, heavy and real. Ethan reopened the folder and placed a single document at the center of the table. The property was purchased for $780,000, he said. The deed lists Avery Collins as the sole owner. The words felt unreal, not because of the number, but because it carried my name. My father leaned back. "That was never meant to be permanent." Judith's voice cut through him, permanent enough to keep her ignorant. Ethan continued. "The property taxes, insurance, and utilities were paid through an account managed by Mr. and Mrs. Collins." "Managed," my mother echoed, as if testing the word. "Controlled," Ethan corrected. "Without the owner's knowledge." Chloe shook her head. The house was sitting empty. We were preserving its value. I was sleeping on couches. I said. My voice cracked once, then steadied. Preserving value for who Ethan slid another page forward. "There is also a usage agreement. Informal, not notarized. It granted occupancy to Ryan Walker's parents." My father's jaw flexed. "Their family." Judith looked at him. "So is Avery." Ethan tapped the page. "This arrangement removed the owner from access while allowing others to benefit. That is not stewardship." Chloe's tone sharpened. "You're acting like we stole it." "I'm acting like I'm hearing about my life for the first time," I said. while everyone else lived it. Ethan closed the folder slowly. Ownership is not symbolic. It carries rights. Those rights were denied. The table felt tilted, as if the truth had weight and it was finally shifting everything toward me. Ethan shifted the folder and drew out a thin stack of papers. Before we discuss remedies, he said, "We need to address pattern." My father scoffed. "Pattern of what interference?" Ethan replied, "Employment, credit, and access." I felt my throat tighten. "What does that mean?" Ethan turned the pages toward me. Over the past 4 years, several anonymous emails were sent to hiring managers at companies where you reached final interviews. The language questioned your stability and reliability. My mother's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous." The messages were traced to this residence. Ethan said calmly, "Sent during hours, Mr. Collins was home." My father stood. "That proves nothing." Judith didn't raise her voice. "Sit down." He did. Ethan continued. "Next, your credit. Payments you made toward your loans were rerouted. Not missed, redirected." I stared at the numbers. Every paycheck, every attempt. So when I thought I was falling behind, "You weren't." Ethan said, "Your account was drained quietly." My mother covered her mouth. "We meant to fix it. When I asked." My voice shook, but I held it. After I gave up, Marilyn's eyes filled. "I thought struggle would make you stronger." Judith turned to her. "Struggle makes people smaller when it's enforced." I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger, recognition. I kept wondering why I couldn't get ahead. I said, "Why doors closed before I touched them?" My father muttered, "It was for your own good." Ethan closed the folder. "What you describe is not guidance. It is control." The room felt different now. Not loud, not chaotic, just exposed. I pressed my palms flat on the table. "You didn't just take a house," I said. "You decided who I was allowed to become." No one answered. "They didn't need to." Ethan slid one last document forward. "This account belongs to Chloe Collins," he said. "For the past 3 years, it received regular deposits." Chloe's chair scraped back. "That doesn't prove anything." Ethan's voice stayed level. "On the 1st of every month, $3,800 was transferred from Stephen and Patricia Walker," my mother whispered. "That's rent." Chloe's eyes flashed. "Maintenance," she snapped. "The house is old. Things break." I leaned forward. While I slept on couches, silence answered me. Judith spoke next, her tone measured. "You charged them to live in a house Avery was never allowed to enter. They offered." Chloe said, "They wanted stability." Ethan nodded once. "And the funds went directly to you, not to upkeep, not to taxes." My father slammed his hand on the table. "It benefited the family." "The family," I repeated softly. "Not me." Chloe turned on him. "You said it was fine." Judith cut in. "Enough." Ethan closed the folder. "Using someone else's property for personal income without consent constitutes misuse." Chloe's voice dropped. "You're exaggerating." I met her eyes. "You built a life inside a house I didn't know existed. No one defended her this time." Ethan gathered the papers. At this point, intent is no longer in question. The power in the room shifted again, not with anger, with certainty, and certainty was heavier than any accusation they could throw back at me. Judith placed a sealed envelope on the table. "I updated my estate plan this morning," she said. "Frank, Marilyn, Chloe, you are no longer beneficiaries." My mother reached for it, then stopped. "Mom, please." Judith didn't move. "You made your choices." Ethan slid a second document beside it. "This is a civil settlement proposal," he said. $1,400,000. Structured restitution. Immediate vacancy of the property. My father's voice broke. "We're your family." I answered before Judith could. Family doesn't decide who gets to breathe. Chloe laughed weakly. You can't be serious. I said. I don't want apologies. I want accountability. Marilyn's eyes filled. We raised you, and you managed me, I said quietly. Those are not the same thing. Ethan pointed to the final page. If the terms are accepted, criminal exposure remains under review. If they are refused, further action follows. Judith looked at me. This is your decision. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. You will leave the house within 72 hours, I said. No negotiations. No explanations. My father stared at the paper. You're doing this to punish us. I signed. I'm doing this to end it. The sound of the pen on paper was small. It was enough. 1 year later, Judith stood beside me on the wooden deck, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. The lake was quiet. So was I. You sleep better here, she said. I sleep, I corrected gently. That's new. She nodded, as if she understood exactly what that cost. They accepted the settlement. I know. I didn't look away. They left within 72 hours. Judith watched me carefully. You didn't ask how they're doing. I already know. I said, they're surviving consequences. She reached for my hand. You built something honest out of damage. I thought about my work now helping people rebuild credit, teaching them how to recognize financial control before it becomes a cage. People wrote to me every week. Strangers who sounded like ghosts of who I used to be. I tell them what I learned. I said, that silence is a signal. That confusion is often planted. Judith smiled. You give them language. I give them proof. I said, and choice. The house behind us was modestly furnished. Nothing extravagant. Nothing borrowed. Every corner was intentional. If this story sounds familiar, I said quietly, don't rush past that feeling. Stay with it. Share it. Talk about it. Someone listening might still think they're failing. Judith squeezed my hand. You're home. I know, I said, for the first time. The word didn't feel borrowed.